It's finally here. Netflix's live-action Avatar. It's a show. I started watching it, and... yeah. So let's talk about Netflix's Avatar. So to be fair, I haven't actually watched the entire first season yet. I've only seen the first episode so far. But if it's any indication of what's to come, I'm hesitant. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's a disaster, but I have thoughts. The first thing to note of the remake is that they changed the introduction to the story. Instead of opening on Sokka and Katara and slowly revealing how long Aang has been frozen, we open on Fire Lord Sozin planning to eliminate the Air Nation. He lets an Earthbender take fake plans saying that he's going to attack the Earth Kingdom so that the nations will aid the Earth Kingdom and leave the Air Nation unprotected. It's a pretty neat, albeit basic plan, and it doesn't actually make much sense. The Fire Lord's plan is to trick the Earth Kingdom into thinking that he's going to attack them, so that the Earth King will ask the other nations for help, which would mean that the other nations, including some of the Air Nation, would go to the Earth Kingdom, leaving the Air Nation open for attack. But the Air Nation doesn't have a formal military, so they were always open for attack. If you wanted to attack the Air Nation, you just go there and start fighting. And his goal is to eliminate all of the Airbenders. So if they go to help the Earth Kingdom, if some of them are going to help the Earth Kingdom, you're not gonna get all the Airbenders. And the war hasn't even started yet, so no one would expect the Fire Nation to attack the Air Nation. Despite this, the opening scenes do give us some very cool visuals in the form of bending, when you can see it. The bending looks really cool, the way the rocks come out of the ground and just how dangerous the fire looks when it's being hurled at people, but these shots are so short and shaky that you can't really focus on anything. I was hoping that this was just going to be for the opening fight scene, but then it continues during the attack on the Air Nation, and even when Zuko is training by himself. Honestly though, the worst part about the editing of the fight scenes is that it seems like a big reason that it's like that is because there's no fighting styles. In the original show, each bending style was based on an actual martial arts discipline. There was Tai Chi for waterbending, Hung Gar for earthbending, Northern Shaolin for firebending, and Bagua Zhang for airbending. Each style was unique and consistent. Now, I'm not an expert in martial arts, I know basically nothing about any martial arts concepts, but from the fight scenes that we get in the first episode, it doesn't seem like there are any in this show. Every time we see someone bending, it reminds me of a middle schooler pretending to bend the elements during recess. But let's talk about the bending itself. My first reaction to seeing the fight scene between the Earthbender and the Firebenders was, wow, the firebending looks really threatening in a way that wasn't possible in a kid's cartoon, and the Earthbending looks cool and kind of off. And a few minutes later, I realized, this guy is sprinting while he's Earthbending. For context, in the original show, Toph says during Aang's training,
"The key to earthbending is your stance. You've got to be steady and strong. You've got to be like a rock yourself."
We do see people moving while earthbending, but it's never running. We're gonna ignore Korra for a second now. Earthbending is always depicted as being rooted in strength and rigidity. If you need to move while you're earthbending, you're not gonna dead sprint while lifting a rock off the ground. But it doesn't end there. For some reason, they've chosen to interpret airbending as telekinesis. Our introduction to Aang shows him literally using airbending to fly around, while in the original show, he mostly uses air to launch or catch himself, and doesn't actually fly without his glider. Now this alone, I wouldn't really have a problem with. To me, it was always kind of debatable whether this would be possible with airbending in the original show. My problem with it comes when Aang is in Zuko's prison, and he uses airbending to pick the guard's pockets and take the dense metal keys. Here's the issue with that. It's f***ing air, which means it should work like air, at least a little bit. Obviously, since it's not a real thing, I would expect some creative liberties. But logically, even with those creative liberties, air shouldn't be able to silently and effortlessly lift dense metal keys without them making a sound.
Because steel is heavier than feathers.
Now I know some of you are probably going to point out that I'm basing this off of a different show. This is a different show from the original, and they could have different interpretations of bending. That's a perfectly fair argument, and I agree. I shouldn't be basing my knowledge of bending on a different show. Thing is, it seems like this show kind of expects that. Let's talk about power demonstrations for just a second. This remake starts its first episode by showing us the genocide of the Airbenders, with Fire Lord Sozin leading the attack during Sozin's Comet. Although I suppose it's not named Sozin's Comet at this point. Firebenders are powerful, and Sozin's comet makes them even more powerful. Like, so much more powerful. They're basically walking tanks in the series finale of the original show. The reason it works in the original is because we only ever hear about how powerful they get with the comet. So when we see them doing all this stuff we've never seen them do throughout the rest of the show, we're like, holy, they really are so much more powerful. But since this show starts with that, we don't get that moment. We see a little tiny bit of firebending before the comet, and then the comet happens and we see the entire battle between the Fire Nation and the Air Nomads. We see them doing things that could be because of the comet, but could also be just regular firebender stuff, and since we haven't spent much time seeing how firebenders fight, or what they can do, there's no possible way to know. It seems like they want us to take our knowledge of what firebenders can do from the original show, but you can't do that if you're also going to contradict the earthbending and airbending from that same show. Also, while we're on the subject, they did the airbenders dirty. We never see the Air Nomads fight in the original show, but we see their power in one single shot of Gyatso alone in a tent with dozens of dead Fire Nation soldiers. In this new show, the Fire Nation takes them out without issue. I don't even think a single Fire Nation soldier dies. To me, it's a missed opportunity to show that the Air Nomads are pacifists because they choose to be peaceful, not because they're harmless. Anyway, let's move away from the bending and talk about the rest of the show. I have so few positives that I feel like I shouldn't continue, but I'm gonna anyway. I won't get into very much because honestly, a lot of it is really small and not really worth mentioning, but there are definitely things that I want to talk about. First off, Sokka. He is way too quick to just give Aang to the Fire Nation. Yeah, in the original, he's reluctant to go save him after Aang goes with the Fire Nation, I think. But in this, he's just going to give him to the Fire Nation because Aang lied about being the Avatar.
Sokka, don't you see he's the Avatar?
And he lied to us about it.
Like, no. Sokka and everyone else in the village knows that the Avatar is needed to end the war, because they all know the story of how the Avatar disappeared, and that's why the war has been raging for so long. But he's just like, nah, he lied to us about being the Avatar, so he's gonna go with the evil Fire Nation who want to kill him. Sokka was always someone ready and willing to fight the Fire Nation alone. He would never give up anyone just to get them out of the village. He would build walls and defenses with his bare hands. He would arm and train kids, and he would attack an entire army alone before he would let them win. Another moment that was really weird was when Gran started doing the original intro, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere and feels really forced.
Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
Aang talks about how he left during the Comet Festival, and she just goes on with the intro from the original show, like everything that Katara says during the opening credits. This is also where Aang learns that he is the Last Airbender, and unlike the original, he can't really consider that they might be alive because everyone in the village knows that the Southern Air Temple was attacked on the night of the comet, and Aang knows that pretty much every airbender in the world was there that night. In the original, Aang is adamant that they couldn't have gotten to the air temples because only airbenders could get to them. So it's not until he goes there and sees it for himself that he realizes that he is the Last Airbender. It's much more impactful for him to face this reality than it is for a group of people who met him 5 minutes ago to just tell him, yeah, they're all dead, everyone knows, and they died the night you left. And look, I get restructuring the story to make it different for live action. It was something that I was hoping they would do. But there are 8 episodes, each an hour long, so that is 8 hours for season 1. As opposed to the 20 episodes from the cartoons season 1, which are all about 20 minutes long, so that's about 6.5 hours. You don't have to rush through this. Aang facing his mistakes and seeing the devastation caused by the Fire Nation isn't boring filler to cut out. It's the whole f***ing show. And what makes it even worse is that they introduced the Avatar state the same way they did in the original. In the original, Aang goes into the Avatar state when he finds Gyatso's skeleton. This was the reveal. Up to this point, Aang believed that there was no way the Air Nations could have been attacked, and that they probably went into hiding. But when he finds Gyatso's body next to a bunch of Fire Nation soldiers, he has to face the facts that his people, his friend Gyatso, died from the Fire Nation. And that's what brings out the Avatar states. Anguish from his people's death, hopelessness from thinking that they could have been alive, anger at the Fire Nation, guilt because he abandoned them and feels responsible for everything that's happening now. Context f***ing matters. At this point in the remake, Aang already knows that his people all died from the Fire Nation attack, including where and when it happened, and he never really ran away.
You're right. Just needs to go up where things always make more sense. At least for now.
He was flying with Appa to clear his mind. So even though he's probably feeling guilty, it's not guilt that he wasn't there because he actively ran away from being the Avatar. It's guilt about the fact that he couldn't have been there because of bad luck. So even though Aang definitely has strong emotions about seeing his home in ruin, the Avatar state in this scene just isn't earned at all. Seeing Aang's pain at finding Gyatso in the original makes me tear up every time, because you can feel it. This just feels empty. They had Aang go into the Avatar state because that's just how it happened in the cartoon. One last thing I feel I should talk about is the acting. It's definitely something. I just don't know what it is. Like, sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's not as much.
He looks dead.
What's that mark on his head?
Let me take a look.
It just feels like some of the actors are trying to be cartoony and some of them are trying to be more serious, and sometimes an actor just tries to do both at different times. I will say, I do enjoy the cast. Everyone to me seems to portray their characters pretty well, especially Dallas James Leo who plays Zuko. He's like the perfect live-action casting for Zuko. Really, my only complaint of the cast is Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, who plays Iroh, but to be fair, that's because it's probably impossible to replace Mako, who was the original voice for Iroh. Overall, this show so far is disappointing. Like I said, I've only seen the first episode so far, and I do intend to watch the rest of the show, but I don't foresee myself enjoying it nearly as much as I was hoping. That said, there are aspects of the show that are enjoyable, and it's not hard to imagine people genuinely liking the show, or better yet, enjoying the show enough to finally check out the original series. The show definitely has a lot of issues though. The biggest being that it doesn't seem to know what it wants to be in relation to the original series. It seems like it wants to stand alone and be its own thing, which is great, and I think any remake should do that. But then, it also seems like it depends on your knowledge of the original show to make it really work. And you might say that that's not really an issue, because fans of Avatar will have already seen the original. And to that I say, if this show only works after you've seen the original, then what is the point of watching this show? Anyway, thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe if you want to, if not, maybe reconsider. And I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you much.